Well, good morning. First of all, I want to thank Elizabeth and Tim and the OMA board for inviting me back or kind of dragging me out of retirement. A lot of you might recognize me or remember me from 10 years on the board while I was representing Intel. Others may not recognize me because I'm in a suit and tie. Today what I'm going to try to do with the keynote is to bring first, before we get into nitty-gritty of APIs and what we can actually do in the networks, is to kind of bring the level up a little bit and try to define who are the OTT players, what are the common characteristics, what do we really have to look for, and why are they OTT players? You know, if we would look at the headlines, the first thing that would come to our mind, and these are grabbed from different trade journals and papers over the last year or so, we'd say, God, these guys are obnoxious. They're taking all the revenue away from the mobile operators. They're competing heavily. We can look at, you know, QTT VoIP costs, death of telephone services, WhatsApp and players like that, taking away all the messaging revenue from the operators. What's going on with these guys? Why is this really happening in the industry? And who are they? I mean, we're really now talking about YouTube, Netflix, WhatsApp, Viper, Facebook. Not too long ago, some of these over-the-top players were on the wired internet and were not considered over-the-top players. So what's really happened? But they're important. YouTube represents something like 24% now of all mobile data traffic. Facebook is taking 22% of all mobile messaging traffic. WhatsApp is about 5%. Netflix represents something like 40% of all the traffic over the internet. These are big players. They're important. And so how do we really deal with them? So what I try to do is kind of represent or try to understand what are some common characteristics. So it's very clear now that, at least on the mobile internet, apps are a focal point for end users. Connectivity is really less interesting for most of these guys. And we can look, for instance, in 2013, it's projected that something like 50 to 80 billion apps will be downloaded. By 2017, it's predicted something like 200 billion apps will be downloaded. Clearly, apps are important. Something like 1.2 billion users are using apps. So apps, for most people, are the service. Now, this service is separated, unfortunately, from the delivery infrastructure. So OTT is really a network-agnostic delivery mechanism for services that used to be traditionally delivered by the mobile operators in a more integrated fashion. Also, the service architecture is separated from delivery. There's no real technological integration between OTT services and the OTT apps and the underlying network infrastructure. That's why we see such poor use of network resources, and something to keep in mind for the day. Also, the service revenue is separated from the infrastructure revenue, as well as OTT services are really personalized for the end user. So these are kind of common characteristics, I find, of most of the OTT players. But guess what? OTT is not new. Every industry has an OTT group. If we look at, for instance, logistics, transport, package delivery, Amazon, e-commerce sites, the US Post Office uses FedEx as a delivery service. These are over the top of FedEx. All your sponsored credit cards are over the top of the Master Visa card clearinghouse. But really, what they are is just a clearinghouse of financial transactions. HBO, Showtime, all of the entertainment networks go over the top of the cable operators, whether it's Comcast, Cox, or players in Europe or Asia. And there are even over-the-top players of over-the-top players. So if you consider Google, for instance, an over-the-top player, we have a bunch of services that are basically spatial mashup services that provide different kinds of functions to end users over the top of Google, which is over the top of the current infrastructure, whether it's mobile or wired infrastructure. So over the top is kind of an overloaded expression. Really, these are customers, and we have to keep in mind that Google, Amazon, Netflix, they're also enterprises. They're not just over-the-top players. So, to get a better idea of what we might do in the future or how we might look at this, what I did was take one example, which I'll use FedEx, as how they deal with over-the-top players. Keep in mind, and the reason I took this is because in the U.S., the biggest customer of FedEx is the U.S. Post Office. Now, you could easily think that the U.S. Post Office was competing with FedEx, but actually they're a customer of FedEx, and it works the other way around because FedEx uses the Postal Service also in their Smart Post product line to deliver to all of the end user addresses that the Post Office covers. So the business strategy for FedEx basically was to provide a high value added logistics, transportation kind of related business service that was delivered through a number of operating companies. And maybe a little difficult to see, but they had two or three strategies. One was to build out a global network that was customer focused, secure, and would deliver packages reliably. So there are a number of operating companies that some you might recognize, for instance, FedEx Express, which delivers to something like 220 million sites, countries, with a kind of time-defined delivery strategy. That means we guarantee it'll be delivered in this period of time. You can kind of equate it to quality of service. And depending on, what you sign up for, if you want it delivered in 3 days or a week, or you want it delivered overnight, you pay a different price. But it really represents quality of service. If you look at FedEx Ground, that was the first time a package delivery service was oriented to home users. There's FedEx Office, which was the acquisition of Kinko's and delivery of other kinds of services. FedEx Freight, which essentially does what they call less than a truckload delivery of packages. And what they've done is look at all the different customer needs and break them up into different kinds of services, yet with the same underlying infrastructure underneath. FedEx has something like 80,000 trucks worldwide. It has the largest fleet of aircraft in the world. There's 659 aircraft, larger than any commercial carriers. Of course, they don't deliver passengers, they deliver packages. The one thing that always caught my eye was that even though these companies operate independently within FedEx, they have a common brand. Don't forget, these companies grew inorganically through acquisition. But they have a common brand. And the basic DNA of the company, if you look at what the CEO, Fred Smith, says, it's basically they operate independently, they compete collectively, and they manage collaboratively. And I think that's something to really keep in mind, especially for both the mobile operators and other infrastructure operators that are competing for these kinds of services. So after building out a global network, admittedly through acquisition, acquiring companies to essentially deliver needs to different customer needs, they then applied technology. They were the first to use barcode scanning, but the whole idea of the technology was not for competition, but was to deliver a better end user service. So their Cosmos system is the first integrated system that tracks people, packages, vehicles, weather conditions, reroutes things automatically to get the best possible delivery service. Their DADS thing was kind of a digital assistant, one of the first ones to use digital assistants so that they could track pickup and delivery of services. And then to go further into the enterprise to basically integrate with a set of APIs. And if you're a shopping cart, if you're an Amazon, if any kind of e-commerce company, if you're a large enterprise, you can use these APIs to get at all of the services of FedEx and all of the FedEx companies. So if you look at the progression, build out a secure global network, package delivery that's reliable, use technology to improve end user customer service, and then and again, those are both focused on over-the-top players because those are the real customers, and then provide higher value by going over the top of yourself. So one of the newest services that FedEx offers really is healthcare solutions. So what's the difference? They package things a little differently. They have temperature sensors in the packages. They can do geofencing for security. And they do supply chain management. So they store things and they'll manage the temperature of the packages and store them and so forth. But 90% of the service has already been in place. They just picked a vertical market that needed another kind of solution and then added a little bit of value on top of that. And guess what? They can charge a lot more money for healthcare delivery of packages. So the success of FedEx really depends on the success of their OTT players. And that's something really important to remember in this, is that the OTT players are customers. They're not competitors. So if we look at OTT, so over the top of what? So really it's over the top of what we'll call economic platforms. So if you look at mobile internet platform, which is something that the mobile operators provide, it's that plus apps gives you a new kind of value-added service. Logistics and transport, as we said with FedEx, search and mapping platforms, financial transaction platforms, plus payment and credit card services. So the whole idea is to build an economic platform that others can use and build their value on top of. And so what I've defined the economic platform as is kind of a mediation among a large number of people and companies who gain capability because the platform gives them a coherent, relatively automatic, and continually improving way to communicate with each other. These platforms can be composed of a standard or a set of standards. They can be de facto, de jure, market negotiated standards, not necessarily decreed by government, focused on a well-defined market problem, and chosen by millions of users as convenient and trustworthy and self-improving. And of course determined by needs of customers. So if we keep that in mind and then bring it back a little bit to a topic that's slightly more relevant for OMA, but yet in the same context, is how do we improve the mobile internet platform? Because in essence, it's an economic platform. And first I would say that given the context of those headlines, make sure that we view the OTT players and their applications as customers, not competition. If we look at it that way, there are areas, and this is just kind of my own brainstorming, there are areas that the mobile internet platform can make the OTT services better. So we can improve the quality and predictability of OTT services, for instance, by providing certain high-value offerings like HD video or SLA-based video conferencing. Operators could provide, for instance, network management and connectivity services. The networks also touch, and they can provide in real-time tracking of customer eyeballs. Who's watching what content, how quickly are people clicking through the content, maybe something about spend management so that a lot of times end users will be using an app and not realize how much money they're spending using that app. That's a very common problem. Offering identity and fraud protection services. The mobile operators have spent a lot of time in fraud protection, identity management. This is a big need for mobile internet as a platform and could generate other sources of income. But all of these really are to improve the mobile internet economic platform so that the OTT players can provide apps better, more efficiently, and addressing the real needs of the end users. So just kind of sum that up. Operators are kind of well positioned to act as trusted brands. Even though the brand value is diminished a little bit, and they should reach out and work in concert with middleware providers to really better understand the needs of the OTT players so that the end user can benefit from that cooperation. So, again, what I was trying to do is bring this up a level, understand that the OTT players are actually customers, not competitors. We can improve the mobile internet platform through a variety of enablers, working collaboratively with middleware providers to improve the value of this underlying platform and basically to treat the OTT players as customers and not competitors. So you'll hear today probably looking at the other topics that have been covered, more details about middleware, how we can improve enablers, how we can address the needs of the OTT players, and I'm sure everyone will benefit from today's sessions. So, thank you. That's all I have.